Hey everyone, let's do something different tonight. We're not just going to talk about the Civil War, we're going to step into it. I want you to imagine what it was actually like to be a soldier. Not the grand battles you see in movies, but the gritty, exhausting, day-to-day reality. Forget the glory. Forget the clean uniforms. Think about the blisters, the bad food, and the constant, grinding fear. The first conscious sensation was not sight, but a deep, pervasive cold that had little to do with the pre-dawn air and everything to do with the sodden, unforgiving Virginia clay beneath you. It was a chill that seeped up through the thin wool of your blanket, through the rubber ground sheet that had long since lost its ability to fully repel moisture, and into the very marrow of your bones. You were 19 years old, but your body felt ancient, a collection of aches and protests. 6 months. It felt a lifetime ago that you had stood in the sun-dusted town square of your Ohio village, your chest swollen with a pride that felt foolish now. The brass band had played, and pretty girls had pinned crude rosettes to the lapels of your new, ill-fitting uniform. The speeches had promised a short, glorious war, a 90-day adventure to put the Southern rebels in their place before returning home in time for the harvest, a hero. That naivete had been your first casualty, left to rot on the banks of the Potomac. The war was a vast, insatiable entity, and you are now consigned to its grinding, indifferent machinery for 3 long years. The air inside the 6 by 4 foot space of your pup tent was a thick organic paste of smells. The wet dog odor of mildewed wool, the acrid ghost of last night's campfire smoke, the pungent sweetness of unwashed male bodies, and the faint, ever-present undertone of latrine trenches and decay that seemed to hang over the entire army of the Potomac like a miasma. Your mouth was a barren, sticky landscape. You moved your tongue, a clumsy, foreign object, against a palate coated in the fine, alkaline dust of yesterday's march. Blindly, your hand found the cold, familiar curve of your canteen. It was made of tin, and the water within always carried its metallic taste, a constant reminder of the Army's industrial remove from the clean, fresh water of the creeks back home. You allowed yourself one small, measured swallow, just enough to unstick your tongue. The act was one of profound discipline, a lesson written in the suffering of others. You had seen it firsthand, the mad, desperate dash of a parched man to a stagnant, green-scummed pond during a halt. The swift, brutal onset of the cramps that doubled him over. The bloody, humiliating flux of dysentery that followed. The subsequent rapid wasting away in a fetid hospital tent, his life seeping into the soiled straw beneath him. Water was life, but it was also a potential instrument of a slow, inglorious death. To your left, Samuel, your tent mate, erupted into a coughing fit, a deep, rattling convulsion that seemed to start in the soles of his brogans and tear its way up through his lungs, ending in a wet, gurgling gasp for air. He was 24, a Pennsylvania farmer with hands that were still calloused from the plow, not the musket. He had left behind a young wife, Sarah, whose name he whispered like a prayer on bad nights, and 2 small children whose faces were beginning to blur in his memory. The cough had taken root weeks ago during a relentless, cold spring rain, a seed planted in the damp and nourished by exhaustion and poor rations. The regimental surgeon, a man named Dr. Morris, whose eyes held the permanent, hollow look of a man drowning in a sea of futility and gangrene, had listened to his chest with a cold brass stethoscope, pronounced it camp fever, and offered a small dark glass bottle of laudanum. The opium-laced syrup quieted the cough for a few hours, but left Samuel moving through the world in a blurred, distant haze, his speech slurred, his hands trembling. You both knew it was no cure, merely a chemical postponement of an inevitable crisis. Outside, the camp was beginning to stir with the low, grumbling symphony of an army, waking to another day of hardship. It was a sound of hacking coughs that echoed. Samuel's the soft, guttural curses of men pulling on stiff, damp boots, the metallic clank of a bayonet scabbard against a canteen, the sizzle of salt pork hitting a too-hot skillet. You sat up, your joints protesting with a chorus of pops and aches that had become the soundtrack of your mornings. You pulled on your brogans, the cheap, pebbled leather already cracked and warped from countless miles, their soles worn thin as paper and offering little protection from the stones and ruts of the road. A quick, practiced inspection of your feet by the faint light seeping through the canvas revealed the familiar landscape of misery. The skin was pallid, wrinkled, and tender from constant dampness, a condition the surgeons called trench foot. There was the angry, hot blush of a new blister on your right heel, and the yellowing, leathery calluses on your soles. They were your body's only pathetic defense against the endless miles. Your uniform, a federal blue sack of coarse, unyielding wool, was your entire wardrobe. It was stiff with the salt of old sweat, stained with grass, mud, grease, and the unidentifiable grime of camp life. It chafed mercilessly at your neck, under your arms, and against your inner thighs, leaving raw, weeping patches of skin that burned with the sting of sweat and the abrasive rub of every step. You joined the shuffling queue of men gathering around the company cook fire, their faces gaunt and shadowed in the flickering light, their eyes holding the 1,000-yard stare of profound fatigue. The fire itself was a meager thing, more for ceremony and coffee making than for warmth. Breakfast was a daily ritual of deprivation. The centerpiece was hardtack, a simple flour and water biscuit that the quartermaster's department had, through some mysterious alchemy of preservation, rendered into a substance of legendary, tooth-threatening durability. It was pale, thick, and as hard as a slate shingle, often stamped with the manufacturer's initials as if to claim ownership of this inedible brick. To eat it, you had to place it on a rock and smash it with the butt of your rifle or the pommel of your bayonet, a process that sent shards flying like shrapnel. The resulting fragments were then dunked into a tin cup of coffee, a bitter black life-sustaining brew made from grounds that had been reused until they were nearly spent, but which represented the single most important. Comfort, the one reliable pleasure of your day. As the hardtack softened, it released its secret inhabitants, tiny, dark weevils and maggots that floated to the surface of the coffee like a morbid sprinkling. The veterans had a grim saying, "What don't kill you, you eat for breakfast." You had learned to skim them off with a finger, or on especially hungry days, to ignore them altogether, the faint, nutty crunch of the weevils, a small, disgusting price for the precious calories. This, along with a thin, greasy, heavily salted strip of pork that was more preservative than meat, was the fuel that would be expected to power you for the next 20 miles under a blazing sun, carrying a small house on your back. Then came the daily miracle, the moment that could mend a fractured spirit or break it entirely. Mail call. The company clerk, a bespectacled, perpetually ink-stained man named Wilson, who had been a bookkeeper in Philadelphia, would appear with a worn leather satchel, and a reverent, anxious hush would fall over the company. A letter from home was not mere paper and ink. It was a sacred artifact, a tangible thread connecting you to a world where people slept in beds with sheets, ate from plates at a table, and spoke of things other than marching, killing, and survival. You watched as a freckle-faced private named Jenkins, a boy who couldn't be older than 17, received a letter, his entire being transforming as he clutched the paper to his chest like a holy relic, a wide, unguarded smile breaking through the grime on his face. Samuel got one too, the handwriting on the envelope delicate and familiar. He didn't open it, merely storing it inside his jacket, over his heart to be savored in a private, quiet moment later, a secret balm for his soul. Your name was not called. The hope that had momentarily lifted your spirit curdled into a hard, cold lump of disappointment in your gut. You told yourself the mail system was unreliable, that a letter from your mother, or dare you hope from Emma, the girl from the neighboring farm, was surely on its way lost in the chaotic web of wagons and railroads. But the silence from Ohio, day after day, felt like a profound abandonment, a confirmation that the person you were back there was already fading from memory. The fragile moment was shattered by the sergeant's voice, a sound like gravel being poured down a tin chute. Form up. On your feet, you miserable lot. We're burning daylight. You think Bobby Lee's waiting on you? The march began. This was the true, unending metronome of a soldier's life, a punishment more relentless and psychologically draining than any single battle. You heaved your knapsack onto your shoulders, its weight some 40 to 50 pounds, a familiar burden that promised fresh agony by day's end. Its contents were your entire worldly existence. The 9.5-pound Springfield rifle musket, its stock scarred from use and its barrel slightly fouled from yesterday's hasty cleaning. The 17-inch triangular bladed bayonet in its leather scabbard, a cold, brutal piece of steel. A leather cartridge box containing 40 paper-wrapped rounds of .58 caliber ammunition, each one a small, deadly parcel of powder, ball, and wax. The half-empty canteen, a haversack holding the remnants of your rations, a wool blanket that was too thin for winter and too hot for summer, a rubber ground sheet that was your most prized possession for its ability to fend off the damp, and in the very bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, the fragile, sacred treasures of your past life, a small leather-bound Bible from your mother, a daguerreotype of your family standing stiffly and formally outside the white clapboard farmhouse, and a single, slightly crumpled letter from Emma, its contents memorized long ago. The drum began its beat, a hollow, rhythmic thumping that set the pace for your suffering. The great blue column, a snake of misery thousands of men strong, lurched forward. Left foot, right foot. You learned the soldier's trick of dissociation, to send your mind away to the cool, dappled shade of the creek behind your parents' farm, to the smell of fresh-cut hay, while your body performed its mechanical, punishing duty. The sun, which had been a welcome warmth at dawn, became a brutal adversary by mid-morning, beating down on the dark wool of your uniform, turning it into a mobile sauna. Sweat poured from your hairline, stinging your eyes and tracing muddy paths through dust. The road itself became your enemy. The men and horses at the front kicked up a fine alkaline dust that hung in the air. It was a pervasive, choking fog that coated your skin and filled your nostrils. You breathed it, you tasted it, you became it. The weight of your pack settled into a deep, burning ache between your shoulder blades. The straps dug painful grooves into your collarbones. The blister on your heel burst. Every step rubbed the raw, exposed flesh against the coarse, damp wool of your sock. A small, focused point of fire amidst the general agony of your existence. You passed a babbling creek, its water clear and sparkling over smooth stones. The sound was a physical torment. Every cell in your dehydrated body screamed for its cool, clean embrace. But the column did not break stride. Water discipline. A mounted officer called out, his voice tight with the strain of command. His horse snorted impatiently. When a halt was finally called, it was not for rest. It was a controlled, tactical operation. Men from each squad were designated to fill canteens for their comrades. Their movements were quick and efficient to prevent disorganization. A zealous mob was a perfect target for Confederate cavalry. You watched them, your thirst a roaring lion in your ears. When your own canteen was returned, heavier and cooler, you hesitated. You had to stop yourself from draining it in one glorious gulp. You took another small sip, swished it around your dusty mouth, and let it trickle down your throat. A tiny, tantalizing taste of relief. The world you marched through was a haunting portrait of a nation tearing itself apart. You passed once prosperous farmhouses with windows shuttered like closed, suspicious eyes. Their inhabitants fled or hiding from the passing storm of blue. Fields that should have been heavy with corn lay trampled and fallow. Split rail fences torn down to feed 1 million Union campfires. You saw the faces of those who remained, women with children clinging to their skirts. their expressions a complex map of fear, resentment, and weary pity. Sometimes defiant, cold hatred. You are not a liberator to them. You are just another boy in a dirty foreign uniform, part of the vast, destructive force that shattered their peace. Rumors flowed down the column in a constant, contradictory stream. The Rebs were just ahead, dug in on a formidable ridge. They were in full retreat, their army disintegrating. General McClellan had them cornered against the river. They had a new, terrifying secret weapon. You learned to treat all rumors with skepticism, just like the cook's promises of fresh beef and soft bread. You were a single, insignificant, replaceable component, a machine of unimaginable scale, your fate less important than the alignment of your rifle barrel, or the timing of a bayonet charge. By late afternoon, exhaustion had set in. It was more than tiredness. It was a draining of the will to move, a fatigue of the spirit. When the order to make camp came, it was met with a weary sigh. Yet the day's labor was far from over. The first task was defense. Pickets were sent out as sentinels in the dark. Only then could rest begin. You and Samuel worked in practiced, wordless efficiency, buttoning 2 sheets of canvas together over a horizontal pole. It offered little protection, but it was home. And a miracle the supply wagons caught up. With them came the Holy Grail, fresh beef. The news sent a jolt of pure joy through the camp. The meat was tough and stringy, but it was heavenly. Cooked on sticks, charred black outside, bloody within. No spices, no salt, but the most delicious meal imaginable. You ate with your hands, grease coating your chin. For a few minutes, men laughed and joked around the fire. The horrors of the march temporarily forgotten. As darkness fell, the camp transformed. The marching army became small, fragile communities around fires. This was when the war was almost bearable. Monroe took out his harmonica. Notes of Lorena drifted through the chill air. A contemplative hush fell over the men. The music was a ghost of home. Men wrote letters by dim firelight, carefully constructing lies about food and victories. Others played cards or dice, gambling for trinkets. Conversations were about home, not politics. The smell of hay, apple pie, or a mule's stubbornness. You were just boys, far from home, building a fragile fraternity on shared misery. But peace was always threatened by disease. The camp was a perfect breeding ground for misery. Latrines fouled the water. Flies settled on food. Dysentery struck men down in hours. Typhoid fever brought raging delirium and death. Childhood diseases like measles and smallpox ripped through regiments with terrifying speed. They killed more men than any volley of mini balls. Samuel's worsening cough was a constant, ominous reminder of pneumonia. The old man's friend filled lungs with fluid and offered a slow, suffocating end. The medical response was a grotesque parody of science. Field hospitals were places of butchery. Amputation was the standard solution for most limb wounds. Surgeons worked to prevent gangrene, often with unclean tools. Anesthesia, if available, was a cloth soaked in chloroform or ether. The surgeon's saw was the primary instrument of mercy and horror, its teeth clogged with bone fragments from the previous operation. Medicines were as likely to kill as to cure. Blue mass pills contained enough mercury to induce madness. Soothing syrups were laced with opium and alcohol. Addiction crept through already broken men. To fall sick was often a death sentence. A far more lonely and undignified end than dying in battle. Then, rumors solidified into concrete, terrifying orders. The enemy was near, formed for battle on a defensible ridge. Their artillery was already ranged and waiting. The grinding pace of the march vanished. A tense, deliberate advance replaced it. Companies deployed into long, double-ranked battle lines. A thin blue wall against the innocent-looking landscape. This was the moment of supreme, bowel-loosening terror. The reason for all the endless marching and drilling. Fear was a physical presence now. A cold hand squeezing your intestines and drying your mouth. You checked your rifle for the 10th time. Fingers fumbling with the percussion cap. Your heart hammered like a trapped bird. You looked across the field at the distant butternut line. For the first time, you saw them as men. Farmers and shopkeepers, just like you. Scared, tired, desperate to see home again. Then, the world ended. The first Confederate volley tore through the air. It was not shots, but a single ripping crash of thunder. The air became alive with screaming bullets. A swarm of maddened, monstrous hornets around you. The first man in your company fell without a sound. Another screamed, an animal cry of shock and agony. Then the smoke came, thick and blinding. You were trapped in a small, nightmarish pocket of reality. Your training took over automatic, drilled, mechanical. Handle cartridge, tear cartridge, pour powder, ram bullet, draw rammer, place cap, shoulder arms, aim, fire. The rifle bucked against your shoulder. The noise so immense it became a physical pressure. You loaded and fired, loaded and fired. Your world shrank to trampled grass and blinding smoke. The barrel grew hot, burning your hands through your gloves. The taste of gunpowder coated your tongue. Sharp, coppery, acidic. Through the smoke, you saw flashes of horror. A color bearer waving the flag, his arm hanging broken. A young lieutenant shouting soundless orders, his face a mask of frantic determination. A man you'd shared coffee with now lay staring blankly at the sky. The left side of his face was gone. There was no room for thought or courage. Only survival and the rhythm of the drill. You fired into a smoke-shrouded void. Gray shadows trying to kill you as you killed them. If you were lucky, the firing would slacken. The rebel line would withdraw. A strange, ringing silence would descend, broken only by the cries of the wounded, calling for water, for mothers, for God. The battle was over. The victory felt hollow, meaningless. The word victory had no shape in this place. The adrenaline drained away. You trembled, nauseous, empty. Then came the most harrowing duty of all the aftermath. You were ordered to help carry the wounded. Men with limbs shattered into bloody pulp, with sucking chest wounds, intestines spilling from torn bellies. You carried them to the field hospital. A barn floor slick with blood, or a farmhouse yard turned muddy abattoir. The screams of men under the knife filled the air. The saws grated against living bone. The stench of blood, excrement, and chloroform choked you. These sounds branded themselves onto your soul. They would wake you screaming for years to come. The dead were collected, their pockets searched for effects. Names scratched on wooden boards if there was time. Otherwise, they were buried in anonymous trenches. That night, back in camp, everything felt emptier. Quieter, sorrowful, haunted. You sat by the fire, unable to speak or sleep. You cleaned your rifle with obsessive focus, disassembling it, scrubbing the barrel, wiping every part. The metallic scent of gunpowder was now part of you, woven into your uniform and skin. You saw the faces of the fallen when you closed your eyes. You had looked into the enemy's face and seen your own reflection. A scared, tired boy forced into a man's brutal work. You had confronted the absolute, random fragility of your own existence. The optimistic boy from Ohio was gone forever. His bright-eyed patriotism and belief in a quick, clean war were buried on that field. In his place stood someone harder, older, wearier. A man haunted by things he could never explain. Things no one at home would ever understand. You lay down on the hard, unyielding ground, the daguerreotype of your family pressed against your pounding heart. Around you, the night murmured with sorrow. Samuel's ragged, struggling breath filled the darkness. The mournful call of pickets echoed in the distance. The whisper of the wind moved through the pines. The farm, your family, the girl named Emma. They were all part of the beautiful, impossible, distant dream. A dream from another lifetime. This was the true, unvarnished, brutal cost. It was not a story of fluttering flags and glorious charges. It was a relentless saga of filth, fatigue, sickness, and terror, punctuated by moments of profound human connection, and the simple, desperate miracle of survival, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity.